Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Agreed. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
The nuclear device.
Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
The nuclear device.
Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Ready and waiting. Yes, sir. Very well. Very well. Very well. Of course. At once. Agreed. Of course. Affirmative. Of course. Affirmative.
The nuclear device.
Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed. Of course. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Comrade, affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Comrade, acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Power to overwhelm and destroy.
Creation of a humanoids.
Power to overwhelm and destroy.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Product of a torture.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
The product of a
Acknowledged.
Feeling of helplessness.
Affirmative.
Friend savage.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Affirmative.
First objective met.
Affirmative.
10
Affirmative.
units.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Acknowledged.
Naval unit lost.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit mission failed.
Yes, sir. Ready and waiting. At once.
Waiting order.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The nuclear device.
Very well.
Waiting order.
Affirmative. Reporting. Very well. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Nuclear device.
Comrade.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
It's a nuclear device.
Acknowledged.
Time is running out.
Acknowledged.
Time is running out. Gentlemen, it's a nuclear device. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived. First objective
Acknowledged.
met. 10
Acknowledged.
minutes remaining.
Affirmative. Comrade. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Yes, sir.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Awaiting orders. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Warning, 5 minutes remaining.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Affirmative.
Creation of a humanoids.
Power to overwhelm and destroy.
Creation of a humanoids.
Power
Yes, sir.
to overwhelm
Affirmative.
and destroy.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Warning, 4 minutes remaining.
Affirmative.
Humanoids.
Acknowledged.
Power to overwhelm and destroy. The product of a tortured brain.
Feeling of
Yes, sir.
helplessness is your best friend, Savage.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Warning,
Reporting.
3 minutes remaining.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Warning, 2 minutes remaining.
Reporting.
Warning, 1 minute remaining.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Acknowledged. Comrade, acknowledged. Affirmative.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Comrade, acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Power on. Let's start. Got juice? Fully charged. Fully charged. Doggy. Let's start. Power on. Right now. Good, baby, good. Extra crispy. Fully charged. Fully charged. Power on. Extra crispy. Let's start. Right now. Doggy. Power on. Right now. Fully charged. Fully charged. Doggy. Let's start. Good, baby, good. Power on. Fully charged. Fully charged. Extra crispy. Good, baby, good. Doggy. Extra crispy. Fully charged. Doggy. Fully charged. Right now. Fully charged. Good, baby, good. Right now. Doggy. Doggy. Let's start. Good, baby, good. Let's start now. Good, baby, good. Right now. Fully charged. Good, baby, good. Power on. Doggy. Power on. Power on. Good, baby, good. Fully charged. Let's dance. Power on. Doggy. Extra crispy. Good, baby, good. Extra crispy. Doggy. Extra crispy. Good, baby, good. Right now. Power on. Right now. Extra crispy. Good, baby, good. Fully charged. Shocking. Let's start. Good, baby, good. Power on. Let's start. Right now. Power on. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Unit lost.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Report acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
orders. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Got juice? Fully charged.
Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Mission accomplished.